Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is the Commando Cast, a video cast about all things Star Wars Destiny. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando. The recent Star Wars Destiny events at Adepticon have made me awful nostalgic. In particular, the FFG Standard event, which somehow ended up not being taken down by Trandoshans, brought those warm fuzzies. Don't get me wrong, you all know that I firmly believe that ARH has improved the game on basically every level, such as, consistent releases. That said, it still makes me miss the days of rolling dice in person and a vibrant, wide community. And while we're fighting hard to bring IRL Destiny back, it won't ever be the same as the good old days. So tonight, in an honor to times past, I'm covering my favorite decks from each meta in the FFG era of Star Wars Destiny. Hey there, Star Wars Destiny folks. Welcome back to Dice Commando and the Commando Cast, and happy Destiny Friday. So an exciting weekend of Destiny for us. The Rumble in P-Town is going down tomorrow. I don't know why I had so much of that, but yeah, it's going down tomorrow. So I'm going to be rolling out early on Saturday to get set up, and then planning on seeing all you guys coming. The plan is to have a live stream and also record. As you guys know, with live streams, they can sometimes be hit or miss, but I've done them before there, so they should work. So that is the plan as of today. So hope to see you all there. And for those of you who can't make it, hope you can join us in spirit. So looking forward to that. That'll be very exciting. All right, so tonight, going through my favorite decks from all of Star Wars Destiny. Now, it's kind of funny because Destiny was a game that I definitely like to do like a go wide approach, and I like to play a whole bunch of different decks so that I could get variety and learn how they worked. But there were a lot of decks there was a deck from each meta-ish that I had kind of zoned in on as wanting to play. So you will notice as we go through this tonight, though, that there are more than 9, right? There were 9 sets, 10 sets if you count transformations, which I don't. But there are more than 9 sets here, and that's because, or 9 choices here, but that's because we got erratas during a lot of those, because as you guys remember, sometimes it would be a long time in between product releases. So let's go ahead and get started, and hopefully it'll make sense as we go and we can talk through it. Now, also, we're kind of going to start off weird because Awakenings and Spirit of Rebellion. So what you see there is Awakenings. My favorite deck was Luke Ray. I did get a lot of reps with Phasma Bala Trooper. That was obviously, I think it was the best deck back then. It obviously didn't win Worlds, but I think that was the best deck back then. But the deck I enjoyed playing the most was Luke Ray. This was the one that I zoned in on first. 3-dice start, mono blue. You look back on it and look at everything and all the problems it had with money and generation, and man, it was just different. It was just different back then, right? But I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed not having to worry about spotting and getting some of the powerful effects out of it. And it was a lot of fun. And then came Spirit of Rebellion. And the other thing you need to remember during this time was, it was harder to get cards back then, right? Spirit of Rebellion basically dropped at about the same time that we were coming out of the Awakenings product shortage, drought, non-existence, whatever you want to call it. So it made a lot of sense to move into something that we had at the time, right? I mean, obviously it was cheaper, but it was also just harder to get stuff. And sometimes you weren't willing to pay $50 for a Destiny card, right? Which is completely reasonable. Seems ridiculous these days, right? But so in Spirit of Rebellion, we got 2 things. We got Vibro Knife, remember, which later ended up getting it's errata, which worked really well with Rey. Plus, we got My Ally is the Force, which was the one that let Luke double hit, right? So that was what I ended up playing through the first store championship season. I think I got top 4 at the shop. The shop that will go unnamed that we used to play at before we moved to Gunray. Had a lot of fun with that. That was definitely my favorite going into coming out of Spirit of Rebellion. All right, moving into EAW, when Empire at War dropped, I was very excited about Cad Bane. You guys also remember the 2-player set dropped a little bit before that. It was like a month and change before that. However, I was on my sabbatical and I was taking a road trip during that time, so I did not get a lot of Destiny in that little gap. I actually bought the 2-player set like the day or day 2 before I left. I ended up getting some games in Texas and some in Idaho. And anyway, I ended up picking up Cad Phasma. That was what I played to a fair amount of success until obviously it got killed. Right? They gave Phasma the bump, so it made Cad Phasma not be playable. Made it 31 points. At which point I moved on to Cad Sienna actually for a bit. But what I ended up for going into, that was the first regional season, I believe it was. I was pretty heavy into Kylo FN. Now this was post FN nerf, because I believe the FN nerf came the same time that the Vibro Knife nerf did, if my memory serves me correctly. So this was a 3-dice start as well, but Kylo was doing pretty crazy things back then. If you guys recall, he was really limiting the meta. Not to mention the fact that FN, even after he was fixed, or because he came at the same time that the overwrite rule was changed, right? So it wasn't the overwrite thing. It was just a single die with him with the overwrites, but it still did some pretty good things because Kylo got the damage generation. FN was throwing dice in the pool. Removal was a lot harder back then. So I really enjoyed this one. This one, keep in mind, was about the same time as, it was kind of weird overlap with the way the Portland regional worked, that the set had dropped. Legacy set dropped part of it, but like the starters weren't out yet, so that wasn't legal. So I was ready to play this going into the regional, and then some decisions were made around product legality around the Portland regional. I decided not to play, but again, it was the same time that Commando was a big one, and that was the one that I really zoned in on as well through Legacies. This was the deck I played a lot of decks through Legacies. It was a really great set. Towson Vet is the one I won the Trilogy Galactic Qualifier in Portland. But the deck I enjoyed playing most through that meta was Poe-Hondo. I actually played a fair amount of Poe-Hondo, and then I flipped it into even the next set, and then I kind of flipped that into Poe ATG Han. But this really was my love of that time. It was just good, right? You had your special chaining, force your opponents to make option. Red-yellow was good. It was my thing. You had retreat back then. Remember, you didn't have all the Poe. You didn't have the Poe ships. Well, you did have a black one, but it was bad. It was a 4-drop black one. But I had a lot of fun with this one as well. I don't know if there's too much more to say about that. I mean, the deck kind of speaks for itself. I believe it took down several regionals in the time. It was a good deck, and like I said, it just kind of spoke to me. And when the deck you enjoy playing is also really good, that doesn't suck. All right, then moving into Way of the Force, I have 2 on here. So Way of the Force was Yoda Cassian Mill. The disclaimer there being, this is the one that I won my store championship with, and because it was relatively early, Mill was it was relatively early in that season. Later that summer was when Millpocalypse happened with, I believe it was Gen Con and all that. But it was pretty clear to me and many others that Mill was very, very, very strong in Way of the Force. So that's what I was on. I was on Cassian Yoda Profitable. I had a good amount of success with that. It was not a deck. I enjoyed playing the deck, but it was not a deck that I would often bring to locals. It was my competitive deck of that time. On the other hand, I played the same pair, but in a damage-focused version, as did Mike in many cases. It was kind of our team deck that we developed at the time. So it was the same pairing, but it was also Way of the Force, Yoda, Cassian damage, right, for your special chaining and kind of presenting multiple threats. So it was not as effective. It was not as reliable as the Mill version, but that was a lot of fun. So that's what I was on back then. Amy, we had a lot of fun back in that day with Plo and all sorts of stuff with Amy before Plo got gross with Ewoks. All right, moving into Across the Galaxy. So this was a set that was out, as you guys remember, for a long, long time. There might have even been 2 erratas during that set. But this was largely dominated by the whole Vader's Fist thing later on. But early, the deck that I enjoyed, believe it or not, was Fire Spray reset. I really enjoyed that Beckett, Sienna, AR pull the fire spray and get it out. Mostly because mods were new. We were having a lot of fun with mods at the time. This was even after, because Sienna had been, didn't they make her a power action? I think they made her a power action, so you could only do it once. Because remember, originally you used to be able to do it a lot of times. Generally, you'd only get it off once anyway, but it did have that potential there to do that. So that was a deck that I just enjoyed because it was fast. It was kind of low health, kind of glass cannon. You guys see a theme going through this by and large that my damage decks I preferred to be red-yellow. I don't think that's a secret for those of you that have followed the channel for a long time. But yeah, I really enjoyed this deck, and being able to start, it wasn't that hard to find money. So you had the 2 money sides. Beckett had his thing. Had a lot of fun with this deck. You can do Truce into Beckett. Good deck. After that came, I think, this should come as no surprise to everybody, Jyn Cassian. Right, Jyn Cassian was my flavor deck that I enjoyed playing. I had considering where this deck fell in the meta, it always felt to me like it was a tier 1.5. Most people would probably put it in a tier 2. I had a fair amount of success with this deck, being able to go in and kind of scalpel people's deck, scalpel the choices out with Jyn. I mean, it's had its issues. When Cassian went down, you lost a lot of tricks. But a lot of people would go for Jyn first. But again, I don't need to rehash this. You guys know that this has always been a deck that I've always loved. I've always liked playing, and that was definitely my fallback in the ATG meta. I do want to note the one that I went, it was the second regional in Portland. I was on Snoke, Rebel, Traitor, and Trooper, I think it was. I think those points work out. Doing, dirty things. That's the one that I went undefeated in Swiss and the Portland regional. But that was not a deck. That was a competitive deck that I pivoted to at the time. That was not a deck I enjoyed playing. But that was the type of meta it was back then, was make money and boost damage, and it was just a race, right? And I've always had fair amount of success with those mathematical type decks, which is what that was. But it doesn't mean it's fun to play, right? All right, moving into Convergence, the deck that ended up being kind of my deck at the time. Now, remember, this set was also out for a fair amount of time, so we had a lot of time to kind of go through other things. I was playing, there was a Han deck. Oh, it was Han, Biggs, Falcon. Well, I guess that was actually ATG, but Hans, Biggs, Falcon actually got a little bit better in Convergence. Anyway, the one that I ended up going on, I think a lot of people know me for this deck, was Padme Bouche. I had quite a bit of success with that. It's a deck that you wouldn't think should work very well. Padme looked really good on paper, but she had kind of a lot of problems. But Bouche kind of fixed some of that until it worked really well through Convergence. And then when Spirit Rebellion came out, we took yet another power jump, and it just didn't work because the amount of money that could be made, especially with droids, just didn't work. But again, this was a deck that I had a fair amount of success with. I kind of enjoyed the tactics of it. Kind of, again, that red-yellow hit-and-run type style, because you could play hit-and-run there for a while. No, sorry, you could not. Hit-and-run had rotated. So had retreat. Those had rotated at Convergence, so I guess it was just jump. I thought there was another one you could play that got you out of dodge, but either way, you had flee the scene and all that. So that was a deck I really enjoyed. Going into Spark of... Oh, actually, you know what? I think this might be the deck this would probably be the deck that people would remember me for, actually, is Maul, Mando, Retribution, which is Mandalorian Maul is what I called it. This deck, I had a lot of success with this as well. I think this actually was the deck I had, quote-unquote, the most success with, only because, so not in terms of accolades and in terms of trophies and such, but I was doing well with this in a droids meta, right? And droids were, you guys remember, droids were pretty unbeatable for the most part, right? And I had a really fair amount of success with this deck versus those guys. I could even do well versus Papa Palp, whether it be the red version or the yellow version. I could do pretty well with him, just kind of bursting down damage. And I really enjoyed this because it just gave me a lot of options, and there was a bit of a casino-ness to it, but the casino-ness to it was still relatively consistent. So this will always be a deck that when I look back on Star Wars Destiny, I remember. And I loved the thematicness of Maul. I think they nailed it on that. The Mando ended up just fitting out, and we went from there. But man, what a deck. All right, so CM, I have 2 decks for CM. Man, see, we're almost done. 2 decks for CM. My fun deck for that meta was Ayla Tarful. Right now, remember this meta, the CM meta, largely we picked up CM. I think the weekend before we went into lockdown here, and most of my all of my CM meta, aside from playing my wife, was online. So I played a lot of games in those early days online because everybody else was online still. Ayla Tarful tribe, I really love everybody there is good. The team was okay. It was a lot of fun. You get a lot of red blue redeploys out and just kind of roll damage with some focus and flipping. And this was kind of like my consistency deck. Again, I'm both the only one playing this, but I came up with this on my own. I really developed it on my own, and something I really enjoyed playing. Next, I also enjoyed Poe Sabine pilots. Again, it's the red-yellow theme for Andrew, right? This one was not as good, but man, could it pack a punch and could it do some pretty crazy things, especially because, you had jump. Well, it wasn't jump. It was the jump equivalent, whatever that was, hyperpace escape or whatever the heck it was, right? But you had that. You could get in, get out. You're much faster with the piloting because you could do upgrades and pilots, and you could really get in and hit and get out. And yeah, fun deck. Also not great, right, in huge retrospect. But again, it was the CM meta, say what you will about it, was supposedly going into worlds and all that, but there was no worlds. And honestly, the competitiveness of it was really just a bunch of people playing for fun. And I think that was it was fun to have fun, right? So anyway, that is it. Coming out of transformations, I didn't really enjoy very much of transformations. I think the data on that's pretty clear that, we thought I personally thought, and many of my compatriots thought, that Transformations was a really bad set. I think the data's on that Transformations overall ended up being a problematic set and, had to have some things done, but, things move on. And so I didn't really play much Transformation. And then all of a sudden we were in the HR era of Destiny and ARH era of Destiny, and everything got better from there. So anyway, just going back down memory lane, throwing up what my favorite decks were. What I'd love to hear, as you guys have been going through this, hopefully you've been typing already, but what were your favorite decks from the meta? Maybe your favorite deck overall. Competitive, fun to play, both, right? Whatever it may be. As I mentioned here, there are a lot of decks I played competitively because that's how it works. Competitive decks aren't always the fun decks that you enjoy playing, which is unfortunate, but it's just the way it works. So anyway, let me know what you are thinking, what you have been playing, what you're looking forward to. If you love these decks, if you hated these decks, whatever it may be. So anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in. Hoping to see everybody at least online this weekend, if not in person. And if nothing else, folks, go Commando.